Hey there, this is Ari Witten with the Energy Blueprint, and in this episode, I am talking to you about one of my absolute favorite topics, which is why saunas are one of the most powerful medicines in existence. So we're going to get deep into the science on this one. There's going to be lots of amazing content, and I know you guys are going to love it. So without any further ado, let's get into it. The top 22 science-backed benefits of saunas and how saunas can help you overcome fatigue and dramatically increase your energy levels. We're also going to be talking about the mechanisms of how it works and why it works and why the seemingly weird thing of going into a hot box has all of these amazing and profound effects on human physiology. First of all, I want to present a frame of reference for you, which is if there were a pharmaceutical drug that had the same benefits of using a sauna, it would be hailed as a miracle drug and would be the best-selling drug of all time. Now, I'm going to show you exactly why I say that as we get into this presentation, and I'm going to kind of re-emphasize this point as I show you some of the amazing research around this. But here's the really cool part. That drug actually exists. It's just not a pill that you take from a pharmaceutical company. It's a hot chamber that you go into and you experience the benefits of heating up your body and sweating and so on. And that is a sauna. So this drug exists. It's just a sauna, not a pill from a pharmaceutical company. But it is indeed something that is an incredibly powerful medicine that if all of this same research, the research I'm about to show you, existed for some particular drug, let's call it naltrexone or something like that. That's kind of a hybrid of a couple existing drugs, but just some made up prescription drug. If that pill had all of these benefits that I'm about to show you, that drug would be prescribed to hundreds of millions of people. Your doctor would tell you you're insane for not taking it if you refuse to take it. And it would be the biggest best-selling drug in the history of humankind because it would have effects on a level that are so vastly superior to any drug that's ever been created that it would be craziness not to be on that thing. And that's exactly what saunas are. The reason that people don't have the same reaction to anybody who doesn't use a sauna is that we have this kind of different way, the paradigm in the Western world is different in the way we look at pills versus the way we look at lifestyle habits. We all wish there was a pill that had a magical effect and really amazing transformational effects on our body. And if that existed, everybody would be going crazy for it. As soon as you take the very same thing, not in pill form, people are like, if it's not a pill, I don't really want to do it. Well, what I hope that everybody listening to this podcast, I hope that you are on board with is you're not on board with that mentality. You're not looking for magic pills, and you are looking for truly amazing, powerful therapies, things that profoundly enhance your health and your longevity and your resistance to disease. And you're not looking for magic pills, and you're okay with doing something that maybe makes you a little uncomfortable, like a sauna, for example. So one of the things, as a result of taking thousands of people through my program, through the Energy Blueprint system, one of the absolute most powerful medicines in existence is saunas. I'm absolutely convinced that this is one of the biggest breakthroughs in terms of health technology, of actual, medicinal therapies, things that can profoundly improve your health, make you extraordinarily resistant to a wide variety of diseases, extend your lifespan, and increase your energy, improve your mood, and a whole bunch of other benefits on top of it. So as I'm about to show you in this presentation, sauna use has science to support a huge array of amazing benefits. And real quick, I'll give you an overview of what those are. Increased longevity, improved mitochondrial function and energy levels, enhancing detoxification, reducing rates of heart disease and other types, various types of cardiovascular disease, increasing weight loss, increasing your physical performance, your endurance, and your energy, increased muscle growth, improved brain performance, neuron repair and growth of new brain cells, decreased pain and fibromyalgia symptoms, lowered inflammation, bolstered immune system, preventing neurological diseases, which is becoming an epidemic in the modern world, and massively improving your mood and acting as an antidepressant. And this is just to name a few of the things that we're going to cover. So what if you could do all of those things that I just told you with just 10 to 30 minutes a day, right? Sounds pretty incredible, right? I mean, again, going back to, let me phrase this in a different way. What if you could do all of those things by taking a pill every morning? Again, that would be a pill that is prescribed to hundreds of millions of people. It would be prescribed to basically everyone. And your doctor would tell you, take this pill every day, and you're absolutely nuts if you don't do it. So that's what saunas are. It's a little bit more difficult than taking a pill, but not that much more difficult, to be honest with you. It's not, it only takes 10 to 30 minutes out of your day, and it can be combined with other things, meaning you could read a book or meditate or listen to something that you would normally listen to outside of a sauna, just in the sauna. So it doesn't even need to take up more of your day. The only real issue here is that it might be an expense if you buy one for your home. But that's about it. It's really not difficult to get all of these amazing benefits. So first of all, I want to give some context around why saunas have such profound effects on our body. How are they actually working? So first of all, sauna use is a stressor. Now, I just threw a lot of you guys off by saying it is a stressor. It is a type of stress. And I'm going to explain more about what I mean by that in a second. But it is heat stress. If you go into the scientific literature around sauna use, it's often referred to in the scientific literature as heat stress, quote unquote. So here's the thing. As much as stress has become a really bad word and gotten a bad rap, certain kinds of stressors can very counterintuitively be extremely powerful for human health, much more than people realize. And we actually need these stressors in our life in order for our cells to function normally. It's a key point. I'm going to come back to that more, but now the key concept here, the point to understand of what this is all about is something called hormesis. It's one of my favorite topics, but if you're watching the video, I'm showing some screenshots of some research on the screen here. This one's called Stress Response Hormesis and Aging. That which does not kill us makes us stronger. And basically, there's lots of research showing that hormesis is linked with longevity, is linked with the rate of aging, is linked with resistance to disease, and a number of other important benefits. In my opinion, hormesis may very well be the single most important strategy to improve your health, energy, and longevity. And it's something that very few people have ever heard of, even though there's a mountain of scientific literature on it. Very few people have ever heard of it. Even very few of my peers and colleagues, other health experts, have ever heard of it. Unfortunately, much to the detriment of the people they work with, in my opinion. But hormesis is the process by which a mild or acute stressor increases resistance to other stressors and increases the health, resilience, and vitality of the organism, and the organism being you in this case. So again, this quote from Nietzsche, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. Now, another key point to understand about this is that it doesn't just increase resilience and resistance to the stress that you originally exposed yourself to. It actually builds in resilience at the cellular level and makes the cells resistant to a wide variety of different stressors, not only the one that you expose them to. Again, there's a number of studies, I'm showing screenshots again here for people watching the video, showing that stress tolerance through hormesis is one of the major keys to longevity and resistance to disease. Regarding stress and understanding how stress works in our bodies, it's important to understand sort of two different kinds of stress. There's something called eustress, and then there's distress. Now, it's possible basically to overdo stress, as most people are aware of, but it's also possible to underdo stress. Now, unfortunately, while most people are very focused on the types of stress that they're overdoing, so mainly chronic psychological stress, for example, and just being sort of stressed out and not taking enough time to relax and wind down and de-stress through meditation or yoga or breathing practices and vacations and things like that, we are also greatly under-stressed in the types of hormetic stressors that have the most profound benefits on our physiology. So there is a certain optimal level of including certain kinds of stressors and excluding other types of stressors. Now, if all of this discussion sounds weird to you and you're like, what is this guy even talking about with stress? And this doesn't make any sense. And I thought stress was bad and this guy's not making any sense. Okay, well, you're actually more familiar with stress than you realize, because exercise, physical exercise, like going for a run or lifting weights, is actually a type of hormesis. It's a type of metabolic stress. It's a transient metabolic stress that you're subjecting your body to. And it's something that is not intrinsically beneficial, but is beneficial by virtue of the fact that it is a stressor, temporarily stressing your cells out, and then your cells create adaptations to that stress that ultimately confer resilience and resistance to various diseases. So that's what makes exercise very helpful. Again, not intrinsically beneficial. You'll find that out very fast if you massively overdo exercise relative to what your fitness level actually is. So if you're currently sedentary, you decide to do a 2-hour super intense weightlifting workout with the heaviest weights that you can lift, or you go for a 20-mile run, you're going to find out real fast that your body is exhausted for days after that. You're going to cause lots of cell damage. You may even cause scarring of blood vessels that deliver oxygen to the heart, deliver blood to the heart. You may even have a heart attack and die. It's not uncommon for people doing extreme amounts of exercise. So exercise, again, is a stress. It becomes beneficial if you do it in an appropriate way relative to what your body is currently adapted for, currently fit for. And then you push just beyond that to create new adaptations. That's what ultimately confers the resistance and disease and resilience in the face of stress. So here's the thing, heat stress, like saunas, is also a type of hormetic stress, just like physical exercise. And again, heat stress is incredibly powerful medicine, just as exercise is. Just as we know exercise is linked to a mountain of health benefits. You know, there's a huge amount of science showing exercise prevents heart disease and various types of cancers and diabetes and high blood pressure and neurological diseases and basically diseases in every system of the body. The same is true of heat stress, of sauna use. It not only provides resistance to heat stress, but again, remember the concept of hormesis, it provides resistance to a wide array of different kinds of stressors and ultimately a huge array of diseases in multiple systems of the body, from neurological diseases to the heart, to diabetes, to many types of cancers. Now, I also want to mention that I'm not going to be covering literally every benefit of the use of sauna that has been proven in the scientific literature for the purpose of just keeping this video and this presentation at a reasonable length, and also so I can focus on covering some of the more important benefits at greater depth. I'm going to focus this presentation on just a handful of the biggest benefits. So keep that in mind. If you want a more complete list of all the benefits, please see the article. It's at theenergyblueprint.com/benefits-of-saunas. So theenergyblueprint.com/benefits of saunas with a hyphen in between each one of those last 3 words. So this is the brief version. Enjoy. Now that you understand that sauna use works primarily through hormesis, let's talk about the specific benefits of sauna use. Number 1 is slowed aging and increased longevity. So if you're watching the video again, you're seeing some screenshots of research, and just keep that in mind through the rest of this presentation. For all of these benefits, I have screenshots on here. So if you're listening to this, Just be aware of that. I'm going to be reading quotes from these studies in many cases. And I would also encourage you, if you can, to watch the video just so that you can see some of the visuals that I've created for this, and you can see some of these studies for yourself, because some of them are absolutely amazing. So this one is a recent study, just came out a few years ago, and they looked at the association between sauna bathing and cardiovascular events, fatal cardiovascular events, and all-cause mortality. That's dying from any cause. And they just looked to see if there was any association between how much somebody was using a sauna versus how likely they were to die from heart disease or from anything. So here's what they found. Pretty incredible finding. They found that those using the sauna 2 to 3 times per week, as opposed to just 1 time per week, were a whopping 24% less likely to die from all causes. But beyond that, the effects continue to increase the more that you use the sauna. So those using the sauna 4 to 7 times per week, as opposed to 1 time per week, were 40% less likely to die from all causes. 40%, 40. Now, I'll point out a couple things here. One is that the comparison here is using the sauna multiple times a week compared to 1 time per week, rather than using it 0 times per week. So if they compared it to people using it 0 times per week, the effect sizes would be even greater. Now, secondly, I want to emphasize this number. People using the sauna 4 to 7 times per week were 40% less likely to die during this period. Now, I just want to point out, again, going back to what I said at the beginning of this presentation, if there were a drug, a pharmaceutical drug, that had a study like this, that had a study showing if you take this drug 4 to 7 times per week, you will be 40%, you will reduce your risk of dying in a particular period of time in the next 5 years, if you're towards the end of your life, by 40%. If a study like that existed for a pharmaceutical drug, that would be a blockbuster drug. People would be going nuts for this drug, saying it's the most incredible drug and it's a miracle drug, yada, 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 everybody would be taking this drug. Okay, so I just want to point out the effect size here is massive. So in terms of the specific mechanisms, a lot of this is being driven by what are called heat shock proteins, which are specific mechanisms in our cells, these certain proteins that get expressed and pathways that get expressed that are, they're called heat shock proteins because they're associated with heat stress. Exercise actually stimulates a number of heat shock proteins as well, even though it's not technically heat. It does kind of, in some cases, heat your body up and cause you to sweat. But sauna use stimulates many heat shock proteins in a particularly profound way. And many of these heat shock proteins have been linked to longevity, and people with increased expression of certain heat shock proteins actually live longer. So we know there's an association here with longevity. We also know that worms exposed to heat stress experience both greater longevity and protection from frailty in a dose-dependent relationship. That means the more they get exposed to heat stress, the more protection they get. As little as 1 exposure to heat stress in flies and worms can result in up to a 15% increase in lifespan. This has been linked to the effect on heat shock proteins. Now, obviously, by itself, experiments in worms and flies are not very meaningful to humans, right? We're pretty different. But these types of layers of evidence become a lot more meaningful when now you look at the human studies and you look at the kind of study that I just showed you, looking at how sauna affects cardiovascular disease and all-cause mortality and resistance to all kinds of other diseases. And now you start to assess all these layers of evidence, all pointing in a particular direction. And we do know that humans also have heat shock proteins, and we do know that there's all these dozens of studies showing sauna use is linked to protection from various diseases. Now we can start to go, well, probably at least many of these same mechanisms are likely active in humans as well. Heat stress also activates a particular gene called FOXO3, which has been called the longevity gene, since polymorphisms in this gene are associated with the ability to attain exceptional old age. So FOXO3 affects the expression of a number of other genes, such as those involved in DNA repair and cell death in a good way, like meaning cells die when they should die if they've been damaged or cancerous and things like that. Also immune function, stress resistance, autophagy, which is sort of cellular cleanup of damaged cell parts, tumor suppression, and the activation of stem cells. So all of these factors, all of these mechanisms that we know are involved in heat stress and sauna use, combined with the fact that we have actual data linking sauna use with increased longevity and, as you'll see in the rest of this presentation, resistance to many diseases, makes it quite clear that sauna use can, in fact, extend your longevity and may be one of the most potent tools, most potent medicines for extending longevity that exists. Number two, it improves mitochondrial health and energy levels. So first of all, what are mitochondria? They are the energy generators in our cells. Now, if you are familiar with my work, you've heard me talk a lot about mitochondria. One of the big realizations that I had as I was digging into the science and creating the Energy Blueprint program and working with a lot of the top physicians and scientists in the world to create that program is I realized that mitochondria are really, really, really important. And working on your mitochondrial health is one of the most important things that you can do to improve your health, to improve your energy levels, to increase your longevity and your resistance to disease. Mitochondria are ultimately, in my opinion, the secret key to more energy, to being lean, to protection from countless diseases, and to living to 100 and beyond. Now, I'm spending a lot of time on this particular one because mitochondria are really, really important. So how do saunas improve mitochondrial health and energy? First of all, they stimulate mitochondrial biogenesis, which is the creation of new mitochondria from scratch. Our cells can actually make new mitochondria and actually more mitochondria. They can also cause your mitochondria to grow in size. In other words, sauna use can make bigger, stronger mitochondria that produce more energy. Sauna use can improve the antioxidant response element. This is the internal antioxidant and detoxification system. And when I said earlier that there's many misconceptions around oxidants and free radicals, one of the biggest misconceptions is that taking lots of exogenous or external antioxidants in pill form is a great way to extend longevity and make you resistant to disease. And actually, we know very definitively from dozens of studies at this point that that is just not the case. But what does actually improve your resistance to stress and your longevity and your resistance to disease is building up your internal antioxidant response element, actually making the cellular antioxidant system stronger. And sauna use also increases autophagy and mitophagy, which is basically the cleanup of dysfunctional and damaged cell parts inside of your cells, as well as the cleanup and repair of damaged mitochondria. Again, critical part of protecting yourself from disease and aging is having really strong, big, healthy mitochondria and lots of them. So, a couple studies showing that sauna use enhances mitochondrial health. It makes your mitochondria bigger and stronger, can stimulate mitochondrial biogenesis, et cetera, screenshots here on the video. So again, going back to what we talked about with hormesis earlier, basically what the modern world does is it takes big, healthy mitochondria and turns them into small, weak, damaged, dysfunctional energy generators. And having those small, weak, damaged, frail, fragile mitochondria in your cells, that accelerates the rate of aging and increases your risk of many diseases and decreases your resilience. So the modern anti-hormesis lifestyle that's lacking all these layers of hormesis that I talked about earlier directly acts on the mitochondrial level to make your mitochondria weak, fragile, and small. And going deeper in this connection now between mitochondria and hormesis, hormesis affects the size and the number of your mitochondria and the strength of your mitochondria. Your resistance to stress, your resilience, and ultimately your resistance to disease is very much dependent on the health of your mitochondria. So I call this the resilience threshold. So if you're seeing on the screen now, if you're watching the video, this is a little image that I created to illustrate this concept. But basically, so if one has very few mitochondria and weak little fragile mitochondria in their cells, they have a very low capacity to adapt and respond in a healthful way to whatever stressors they're exposed to, before they end up getting into stress overload and then basically pathology. Basically, you start to get symptoms, you start to get health problems, it starts to result in cell damage. So in other words, what a resiliency threshold is to basically to have a high resiliency threshold means that you have a high capacity to adapt and tolerate stressors without it overwhelming and damaging your system and contributing to disease and cell damage that's driving aging, or just, you know, burnout and low stress tolerance, basically. So that ability to adapt without being damaged to the various stressors of life, and we're all being exposed to stressors all the time, not just psychological or emotional stressors, but toxins in our environment, which are pervasive, and we're all being exposed to them all the time, and many other types of stress in the modern world. That stress is always there. So the key question is, what is your resilience threshold? What is your capacity to adapt? And that resilience threshold is largely determined by the size, the health, and the strength of your mitochondria. So having big, powerful mitochondria and lots of them leads to a very high resilience threshold, ability to adapt and handle the stressors of life with ease, without being overloaded by them, without having your cells get damaged, and without experiencing symptoms and disease, and ultimately increased aging and early death. Also, between the ages of 40 to 70, I want you to understand that people typically lose half of their mitochondrial capacity. And there's also probably a similar decline, though this hasn't been tested yet, between the ages of 20 to 40. So most people are losing, as they age, a huge amount of their mitochondria. Literally, you have mitochondria dying off. The ones that are still there are shrinking, shriveling, becoming more fragile and frail. The key thing is, this doesn't have to happen. There's actually research showing that, you know, for example, in people who are extremely fit and exercise very frequently, intensely, this doesn't happen. They actually maintain their mitochondria. So that process, the presence of hormesis, that process of, you know, hormetic stress, being exposed to that, and many layers of it, hopefully, not just exercise, is what stimulates your mitochondria to keep them big and strong, and stimulates the body to create new mitochondria, mitochondrial biogenesis. So that is ultimately what is going to help you preserve your mitochondria and keep them big, strong, and healthy. And again, that having big, strong, healthy mitochondria and lots of them is linked with the things we just talked about: high resilience threshold and ability to handle stress, as well as resistance to disease and slowing the aging process. So mitochondria are really, really important. One more layer to this story that I want to mention. Again, the mitochondria are not just mindless energy generators, they are environmental sensors. And we know from research done by Dr. Robert Naviaux's lab for mitochondria and his work on something called the cell danger response, which is where the mitochondria basically sense that the body's under stress and under threat, and they decide to mostly turn off energy production and shift into defense mode. The ultimate, you know, sort of subjective experience of that state is that you get fatigued as a result of that. When your mitochondria, which are the source of the energy that is being produced in your cells, and ultimately you are a collection of cells, so your energy and your experience of energy is largely a function of how much energy is being produced by your mitochondria. So when that's being shut down, when your mitochondria are going, hey, we're under threat, we're under stress, we're being overloaded, you know, our resilience threshold is being overloaded by too much stress and too intensive stressors, they shut down energy production and they go into defense mode. So it's important to understand your mitochondria, again, are not just mindless energy generators. They are environmental sensors that are controlling gene expression. They're controlling whether your cells are in energy mode or are trying to defend against threats. And if they're more in cellular defense mode, then you experience that as fatigue. I'll give you a simple example of this so you can understand it on a practical level. When you get sick, when you catch a cold or a flu, what's one of the biggest symptoms of that situation? Fatigue. You get tired. You want to sleep. You want to rest. You don't feel like running around and doing all the things you normally do. And the reason why is because your mitochondria are sensing a threat, the presence of a pathogen, a microbial infection, and they're shutting down energy production, which is an intelligent response, by the way, and shifting more into cell defense mode and out of energy mode. So this is one of the biggest factors behind low energy levels and chronic fatigue, is that the mitochondria have basically shifted more into defense mode. So how do you get your mitochondria out of that mode? Well, there are many, many different factors there. You certainly have to address the underlying factors that are triggering that defense mode in the first place. But one of the biggest keys to recovery is that you need to build up the health, the strength, the resilience of your mitochondria. Yes, that's hard if, for people who are dealing with really severe chronic fatigue, who are like, they can't do any physical activity whatsoever. They're basically bedridden. Their bodies are exquisitely sensitive and intolerant to hormetic stress, but you have to understand that when they don't do any sort of hormetic stress, the body just gets more and more fragile and more sensitive to any sort of stress. The resilience threshold just keeps going down and down and down. So you do have to, at some point, start to build this back up, start to build up your mitochondrial health and your resilience threshold. It just needs to be done in people who are really ill, really bedridden, severely fatigued. It needs to be done in a very, very systematic, very slow and cautious way in the initial few weeks and few months, in baby steps, essentially. But again, avoidance of doing those things is not a good route to recovery. So again, I just want to emphasize, I know we've spent a long time on this one factor of mitochondrial health, but this is really one of the biggest things to understand about ultimately, all these other benefits that I'm going to cover. Why does sauna use actually translate into resistance to various diseases and all kinds of health benefits and increased energy and all that stuff? Most of those effects actually revolve around how sauna use affects mitochondrial health, how hormesis affects mitochondria, and ultimately how that translates into all these different gene expression pathways that are increasing resilience to stress and resistance to disease, and are decreasing the rate of cell damage and aging and so on. It largely revolves around how hormesis affects your mitochondria. So really important concept to understand all this, but bigger, stronger mitochondria means more resilience, slower aging, and lots more energy. So mitochondria are very, very important. Benefit number 3, enhanced detoxification. And we're going to cover all the rest of these benefits in a much, much faster way. But enhanced detoxification. So many people don't realize, but sweating is one of the biggest pathways that our body gets rid of toxins. So we actually pump out toxins via our sweat. We can actually, believe it or not, sweat out heavy metals. We can sweat out things like mercury and lead and cadmium and arsenic through going in a sauna and just sweating them out. They literally, your sweat glands will start pumping out toxins along with that sweat when you're sitting in a sauna. So, and this side note, but part of the reason why it's important to go take a shower after you use a sauna is because your skin is covered with sweat that has lots of toxins, including things like heavy metals and BPA and phthalates and all kinds of other toxins just sitting in there. So you don't want to reabsorb those. You want to wash them off as soon as you get out of the sauna. But there's real science on this. We know that going into a sauna actually does result in the body pumping out a lot of these toxins. One more thing I want to mention here is that Sauna use can actually improve your nervous system function and your thermoregulatory mechanisms, increasing the ability to sweat. So there are a lot of people maybe watching this, maybe you're one of them, that's saying, well, I don't really sweat anymore. Well, if you're not sweating, if your body has kind of lost its ability to sweat, that is actually a sign of a problem. That's a sign that your body's thermoregulatory mechanisms and the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system that regulates that thermoregulation response, it's not working properly anymore. So sauna use can actually start to kick it back into gear and get this mechanism, which is partly a thermoregulatory mechanism and also partly a detoxification system of your body. It can start to get that working again. This is another study talking about reduction of chemical sensitivity by means of heat deprivation, which is basically sauna use. And basically they showed that at the end of treatment, 86% of participants cleared or markedly reduced their symptom scores of chemical sensitivity. Participants also had overall improvements in mental and physical energy and a reduction in odor sensitivity to toxic substances. So people who are highly sensitive to stressors, in this case, they're looking at chemical sensitivity, to sensitivity to toxins, 86% of participants completely cleared or hugely reduced their symptom scores on their chemical sensitivity, which is basically just a result of the body getting rid of toxins and also building up mitochondria. So the internal antioxidant response systems are able to handle toxins better. Also, you're building up the internal detoxification systems at the cellular, at the mitochondrial level, that also help the body clear the toxins more efficiently at that level as well. This is another study titled Human Elimination of Organochlorine Pesticides, Blood, Urine, and Sweat Studies. And there's a quote here saying, sweating has also been demonstrated to increase excretion of toxicants, such as organochlorinated pesticides, which have been shown to cause mitochondrial damage, oxidative stress, cell death, endocrine disruption, that's hormonal disruption, and epigenetic modification. It affects your gene expression. So again, we're all being exposed to at least small amounts, if not very significant amounts, of a lot of different things, from pesticides to plastic chemicals to chemicals in our cookware, BPA and phthalates and heavy metals and all kinds of really nasty things, PCB, and there's so much nasty stuff in the food and water supply and in our air pollution as well, that we're all being exposed to. So it is absolutely critical in the modern world to ramp up your habits that help your body detox chemicals, as well as to build up, the mitochondria, the resilience at the mitochondrial level, so that they handle these stressors, they detoxify the stressors efficiently, and they are resilient in the face of oxidants and free radicals, and they can quench those without being damaged by them, building up your resilience threshold, in other words. Benefit number 4, reduced rates of heart disease and cardiovascular disease. So I showed you this study earlier. We talked about the association between sauna bathing and fatal cardiovascular and all-cause mortality events. Before I talk to you about specifically the all-cause mortality aspect, I left out this part, which is the risk of fatal cardiovascular coronary heart disease events was 23% lower for 2 to 3 sauna sessions per week, as opposed to 1 per week, and 48% lower for 4 to 7 times per week. Okay, 48% lower rates of coronary heart disease. Risk of dying from cardiovascular disease was 27% in the group using the sauna 2 to 3 times per week, and a whopping 50% lower for those using the sauna 4 to 7 times per week. So 27% lower if you used it 2 to 3 times per week, and 50% lower for those using it 4 to 7 times per week. So this is, the more you use the sauna, the bigger the benefits get. And I'm sure it will top out at some point, but you can see here going all the way up to 7 times a week is still associated with very strong increases in the resistance to, in this case, heart disease. Here's another study looking at the associations of sauna use with cardiorespiratory fitness on cardiovascular and all-cause mortality risk. And basically they found that those with high cardiorespiratory fitness and high sauna use had a 58% lower risk of cardiovascular disease mortality and a 40% lower risk of all-cause mortality. Another study, Waon therapy, and that's basically a Japanese term for their version of infrared saunas. And they found that sauna use improves vascular flow and endothelial function, that's blood vessel function, by increasing the expression of endothelial nitric oxide synthase, which is basically one of the enzymes that's involved with how well your blood vessels expand and contract. Another study, and this is an animal study, but I wanted to include it because it's so amazing and just remarkable in what they were able to show. So they did whole body heat treatment, basically the equivalent of saunas in mice. And basically they found that whole body heat treatment restores to normal values the main cardiovascular disease risk factors, like lipids, as well as blood sugar control. They also showed that after heat treatment commences, atherosclerotic animals stop dying after just 3 sessions, which is equivalent to 8 years of life extension for humans. So they were actually able to reverse, they use the term relieve, atherosclerotic lesions in the cell. So this is the buildup of plaque in the arteries. And they were showing that sauna use or heat therapy essentially allows mice to stop dying as a result of atherosclerosis. Also, they showed the anti-inflammatory and anti-senescent heat shock response is refreshed by chronic heat treatment. Senescent cells are cells that stop dividing but are not necessarily cleared from the system. So they kind of stick around when they shouldn't, and then they start producing inflammatory cytokines and things that cause chronic inflammation in the system, and they're considered by most aging researchers as one of the primary drivers of aging. So the heat treatment basically refreshed the body's anti-inflammatory and anti-senescent cell response. In other words, it was kind of a reset to the system to allow the body to clear these dysfunctional cells and get rid of them so they stop contributing to aging. So absolutely amazing. It's basically showing, for to summarize this, it's showing that sauna use can profoundly, I don't want to use necessarily the word reverse, because I think that's going a little bit beyond what this is showing, but it's showing that sauna use has a profound effect on your heart health and can essentially stop the progression, if not maybe even reverse atherosclerosis and heart disease. This is one more study I want to show from the Journal of the American Medical Association. It's called Association Between Sauna Bathing and Fatal Cardiovascular and All-Cause Mortality Events. They found that increased frequency of sauna bathing is associated with reduced risk of stroke, coronary heart disease, and cardiovascular disease, and all-cause mortality. And if you're watching the video, I just want you to see these graphs so that you can see what this looks like. Here you have basically the rate of death, and then this is the follow-up time in years, so 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years. So these are very, very long studies, amazingly long studies that tracked people over this many years, and they looked at essentially how many people died from any cause, and they looked at heart disease specifically as well. So this is assessing the duration of each sauna use, and you can see that if you had longer duration, you had dramatically reduced rates of heart disease and all-cause mortality. So you can see that in direct proportion to the length of your session, you're getting a huge reduction. In direct proportion to this other graph here is showing in direct proportion to how many sauna sessions you do per week, you're getting a huge reduction in your risk. So massive reduction. And again, I want to emphasize this, what I said at the beginning. If there was a drug that did this, that had an association with all-cause mortality like this, absolute blockbuster, okay? The drug exists, it's just a sauna instead of a pharmaceutical. Number 7, increased physical performance, endurance, and energy. So these are studies that looked at athletes using saunas and basically showed that athletes can use the sauna. Oftentimes they will have athletes use the sauna right after their training. That seems to be the best time, but it enhances the body's adaptations to the exercise. So they get benefits like increased plasma volume, that's the amount of liquid in the blood vessels in the circulatory system, as well as increased red blood cells and blood flow to the heart. So all of that actually enhances oxygen and nutrient delivery to the body. These are adaptations that are, they're often likened to EPO. That was a drug that caused a lot of scandals in endurance sports. Athletes would inject EPO, which is actually a substance naturally produced in our body in response to going to altitude. And that substance increases the amount of red blood cells in our system so that it increases the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood. So turns out that sauna use can actually do very much the same thing. It can create that same sort of adaptation. Here's another study looking at muscle metabolism during exercise, and they showed increased blood flow to skeletal muscles, improved nutrient delivery, reducing reliance on glycogen stores during exercise. One study noted that heat acclimation reduced glycogen depletion during exercise by 40 to 50%, which is a huge amount. So glycogen, for those that don't know, is basically stored carbohydrate. So this study is indicating that by becoming heat adapted, by virtue of using a sauna regularly, your muscles become way more efficient at using energy and producing energy so that they don't need to rely on burning off carbohydrates constantly. So just the efficiency of delivery of nutrients and oxygen to the cells and the efficiency of production of energy is a really amazing indication that this is something incredibly beneficial. There's also a number of people that have referred to sauna use as a quote unquote performance enhancing drug because there's so much research showing such profound benefits on how it can enhance athletic performance. Benefit number 12, increased red blood cell count and oxygen delivery to the cells. So I already kind of mentioned this in the section on athletic performance, but again, sauna use boosts EPO, erythropoietin is the full word for what EPO stands for, and boosts red blood cell count in a similar way to how altitude causes our body to adapt. So the end effect of this is not just that you become better at tolerating heat, but it actually helps your stamina, your endurance, your performance, your physical and brain performance, as well as your perceived exertion during exercise and your overall energy levels, right? When we're talking about energy, a big part of that is oxygen delivery to the tissues. So sauna use directly causes adaptations that enhance the capacity of your blood to deliver oxygen to your cells and to your mitochondria. Number 13, decrease pain and fibromyalgia symptoms. This is another benefit for many of you listening who are dealing with body pain and fibromyalgia. There's research on sauna use showing that it has been found to reduce headache pain intensity in those suffering from chronic tension type headaches. Another study titled The Effects of Repeated Thermal Therapy for Patients with Chronic Pain. They looked at a group of patients with chronic pain and they did a combination of multidisciplinary treatment, including rehabilitation, exercise therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and sauna use, resulted in decreased pain, decreased anger, and depression scores. After treatment, 77% of patients that were receiving this multidisciplinary treatment and sauna were able to return to work, as opposed to just 50% of those who received the multidisciplinary approach without the sauna. Okay, so the key numbers, again, the difference between 77% versus 50% of the people can be attributed directly to whether they were using specifically the sauna or not just all of these other things that they were getting, rehabilitation, exercise therapy, and cognitive behavioral therapy. So there was a huge increase because of whether they included sauna or not. Here's another study from Japan looking at the efficacy of Wa-on therapy. Again, that's another word for infrared for fibromyalgia. they showed that pain was reduced by nearly half just following the first session only. However, the effect became persistent and lasting following about 10 treatments, at which point the women reported pain reductions between 20 to 78%. Huge, huge reductions in pain, literally within just 10 treatments, and very persistent, lasting effects. Just 10 treatments. You know, that literally might be the span of a couple weeks or 3 weeks of doing these treatments, and you can massively reduce your pain by, you know, basically at least about a quarter, and maybe by nearly 80%. So these are, again, huge reductions. These were just people who used the sauna for 15 minutes, either 2 days or 5 days a week, at just 140 degrees, which is not very hot. And 15 minutes is not a very long session. And you can see that, you know, huge reductions just from this very meager sauna treatment, just for 10 sessions. Number 14, lowered inflammation. Huge, huge benefit of sauna use. We know that chronic inflammation is linked with a wide array of different diseases now, and we know that sauna use decreases chronic inflammation. So this is key research from a researcher who does a lot of work in depression named Charles Raison, and he's looked at the links between depression and inflammation and shown that chronic inflammation is a big factor in depression. He's also done a lot of work around heat therapy and sauna use, showing that sauna use is a very, very powerful way to combat depression. And we're going to talk more about that in a second. But chronic inflammation, or what's called inflammaging, is also linked with a number of age-related diseases and the process of aging itself. That's why they're calling this inflammaging. So sauna use reduces chronic inflammation dramatically. Pretty simple. Lower markers of oxidative stress in this study, and much lower levels of systemic C-reactive protein, which is a marker of systemic inflammation. Men in a study who used the sauna 2 to 3 times per week had 17% lower levels of CRP, and those using the sauna 4 to 7 times per week had 32% lower levels of CRP compared to those who were only using it once per week. Again, the numbers would be even higher if they're comparing it to people who don't use it at all. So these are very, very powerful reductions in chronic inflammation. I will also mention there's research from Charles Raison, again, the depression researcher, showing that the effects of sauna on people with depression and helping them alleviate depression were strongest in the people who have the highest levels of chronic inflammation at the starting point. So it is what that's telling you is that the benefits of sauna use on combating depression may be very much due to the way that sauna use combats chronic inflammation. One other thing I want to mention here is that there's research from Charles Raison on the ability of sauna therapy to combat depression, showing that it's specifically the people with the highest levels of baseline inflammation that have the strongest benefits, that have the most benefits from using a sauna in terms of how much it alleviates their depression. So what that's suggesting is that a lot of those antidepressive benefits may actually come from the fact that sauna use reduces chronic inflammation. Also, I'll mention one other study just in terms of the mechanisms here. There's a study where they exposed soccer players to a sauna protocol, and then they looked at, they actually measured in their blood how much interleukin 10 increased. Interleukin 10 is a very powerful anti-inflammatory cytokine, and they showed, of course, that after the sauna sessions, the body produces a very strong response of this interleukin 10, this anti-inflammatory cytokine. So that's likely at least one of the major mechanisms of this anti-inflammatory effect. Benefit number 15 is that it bolsters your immune system and helps you fight infections. So regular sauna bathing and the incidence of common colds. This is a study. They showed that The incidence of the common cold was similar for the first 3 months of the study, but in the second 3 months, the sauna group had less than half the number of colds. So getting heat adapted strengthens your immune system, strengthens your resistance to stressors, including pathogens. There's one more mechanism that I'll mention here, which is somewhat speculative, and this is kind of me just speaking in a more speculative way because there isn't any research testing this to my knowledge, and I've certainly looked extensively, but skin health with heat and sauna use directly impacting the skin by just exposing it to that heat stress and therefore creating more resilience through the process of hormesis in the skin cells that are being exposed to that heat. I believe it's likely that the same process is happening in the lungs, in the upper respiratory tract, that by exposing the upper respiratory tract in the lungs to heat, that they also have a hormetic response that actually makes the cells in those tissues more resilient, and probably, again, speculative, probably also helps increase their capacity to fight off microbes. Number 17, this is a huge one. Sauna use likely helps prevent Alzheimer's and dementia and other neurological diseases. These diseases are becoming epidemics in our society, and they are extremely scary and harmful ways of dying. I mean, when you are forgetting who you are, you're forgetting who your family members are, these can be very painful ways of dying for you and especially your family. So sauna bathing is very strongly inversely associated with dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Those who use the sauna 4 to 7 times per week had a 66% reduced risk of dementia and a 65% reduced risk of Alzheimer's disease compared to those who only use the sauna once per week. Again, the numbers would be even bigger if they're comparing it to people who don't use the sauna at all. And of course, these studies are controlling for all the other variables like age and smoking and drinking and exercise and all the other, lifestyle factors that could influence this. So this is very, very powerful evidence and huge effect sizes showing that this is probably, maybe along with exercise, the single most powerful tool to reduce your risk of dementia and Alzheimer's disease known to man. This is very powerful medicine. Again, I will reference back, what I said at the beginning regarding if there were a drug that had effects like this, it would be an absolute blockbuster. So hopefully you're starting to see why I say that. Number 19, very, very important one. Sauna use massively improves your mood and acts as an antidepressant. And there's a number of very impressive studies on this subject. So here's one titled Investigating the Effects of Sweat Therapy on Group Dynamics and Affect. Affect is sort of like saying your mood or your sort of emotional state. Participants in group sweat therapy using the sauna obtained significantly more benefit from the therapy than the control group with no sauna use. They experienced better interpersonal interactions, more relaxation, and greater stress relief. Another study from Charles Raison and his team of researchers. This is a 2016 double-blind randomized control trial. It's basically as good as research gets. Performed with people with major depressive disorder. One single treatment of whole body hyperthermia using an infrared sauna resulted in a large reduction in depression scores. These improvements persisted over a 6-week period. A single session of sauna had effects on basically functioned as an antidepressant, that lasted for 6 weeks. So what this is telling you also is that the effects of sauna use on your mood and fighting depression are not just a transient effect that lasts for an hour or 2 or 3 or the rest of the day after you do it. Hyperthermia, heat stress, sauna use, is actually acting through hormesis, and it's creating lasting changes, and it's affecting gene expression in a way that is lasting and persisting. So this is not just a transient effect of where it boosts your mood temporarily, but you're actually doing something that is profoundly affecting things like chronic inflammation and the expression of your genes. The conclusion from this last study is whole body hyperthermia holds promise as a safe, rapid-acting antidepressant modality with a prolonged therapeutic benefit. So pretty darn strong evidence that if you are dealing with poor mood or depression, this is definitely something you should be doing. Number 22, the last one, improved recovery from chronic fatigue syndrome. So there are studies using sauna use for people with chronic fatigue syndrome. Unfortunately, the research is still pretty early in this, but the research that does exist is very, very impressive. So a pilot study found that sauna use improves cerebral blood flow and brain function in all 11 participants with chronic fatigue syndrome. This correlated with self-rated improvements in chronic fatigue syndrome symptoms. Another study found that perceived fatigue, anxiety, depression, and performance status improved in patients with chronic fatigue syndrome following 4 weeks of the infrared sauna WAON therapy. Now, while research on this topic is currently limited, there's just very few studies that have actually tested this. I want to mention that in my experience with the Energy Blueprint program, having taken over 4,500 people through the program and saunas being one of the big things that I recommend, many people, I've seen hundreds of people say that sauna use has been the single biggest needle mover in helping them overcome chronic fatigue and recover their energy. So again, I just want to emphasize, if you're somebody dealing with fatigue, sauna use can be absolutely powerful medicine to increase your energy levels. So that's the top 22 benefits. I want to cover some common questions and about how to use saunas. And then we'll wrap up with some recommendations on what my top saunas actually are. So first of all, who should avoid sauna use? Saunas should be avoided by people with, in general, medical conditions. If you have a medical condition, you need to check with your doctor as to whether a sauna is okay for you. If you have low blood pressure when standing, if you're prone to fainting, things like that, you definitely want to either avoid it or use it with a buddy. And that's basically the main reason to avoid it. If you have that, it's essentially that you don't want to faint in the sauna and then get stuck in there and so on. So ideally, you always have somebody watching you or there to help you if you need help. In terms of pregnancy, in general, sauna use is often not recommended to people dealing with pregnancy. The truth is, in Europe, it's extremely common for women to be using saunas during the pregnancy. But what I would recommend here is you don't want to start sauna use like in the middle of a pregnancy or at the end of a pregnancy. Ideally, you are already heat adapted, and then if you get pregnant, it's generally regarded as not a big deal or perfectly fine to continue using the sauna in that situation. If you're trying to get pregnant or you have lower sperm count or something like that, you may want to consider not using a sauna because the heat, any sort of exposure to heat, will temporarily lower sperm count. Also, alcohol and sauna don't mix. Kind of this is common sense, but don't drink a bunch of alcohol and then go hang out in the sauna. Just not a good idea. If you're dehydrated, not a good idea. If you have a history of fainting or hypoglycemia, also not a good idea. Also, just common sense, listen to your body. If your body is telling you you're, gonna faint soon, or you're feeling lightheaded or really uncomfortable, just get out, listen to your body. Don't force yourself to do something that your body's telling you not to do. But if you have any serious medical conditions, just check with your doctor. So I want to cover some facts about saunas and kind of, some of the differentiating factors between infrared saunas and traditional saunas, and help you guys understand some of the key differences here a little more deeply. So traditional saunas, like what you would find commonly in most gyms or health clubs, as a radiant heat style sauna, like hot rocks on top of an electrical heater. Now, these saunas work by heating the air in the room. So they work by convection, and by being in a room filled with hot air, it eventually makes you hot. Infrared saunas work through a different mechanism, not so much by heating the air in the room, though they do that to some extent, to a lesser degree than traditional saunas. They actually emit infrared. So they have emitters on the wall that emit infrared rays, which is part of the electromagnetic spectrum. So, the sun emits infrared rays as well. And those infrared rays penetrate into our bodies and actually heat us up from the inside out. So, kind of different mechanisms of how they're actually working. In terms of the actual temperature, there are some significant differences as well. So because infrared rays are penetrating into your body and heating you up from the inside, the temperature in the chamber, in the actual sauna itself, of the air is usually a lot lower. So infrared saunas typically are at 104 to 140 or 150 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 40 to 60 degrees Celsius. Traditional saunas are usually between 70 to 100 degrees Celsius, which is in the neighborhood of about 158 to 212 degrees Fahrenheit. So somewhere in there. So you can see there's quite a significant difference in that. But having said that, you may sweat in an infrared sauna just as much or more in some cases, even at a much lower air temperature. So the actual sweating element of it is about the same or more in many cases. And this is really the real benefit why infrared saunas have become very popular and more popular than traditional saunas for most people, is that they're much more comfortable. So you can get the sweating and detoxification effect while being significantly less uncomfortable than you would with a traditional sauna. Also, I'll mention steam rooms. I generally do not recommend steam rooms unless you are sure of the water supply. This is a factor that most people are not aware of, but water, tap water, especially if you're in the United States, is filled with contaminants, and those contaminants, things like chlorine disinfection byproducts and ammonia and a number of other different compounds in the water supply. And I've written an extensive article on water filtration technologies. But those contaminants in the water supply become much more toxic when they're inhaled versus when you drink them. So this is actually a much greater degree of toxicity to inhale the vapors from like a hot shower or a steam room compared to actually drinking that tap water. So unless you are absolutely sure of the water supply in the steam room that you're using, like for example, you have a steam room built at home and you have a home water filter that is making sure your water is extremely pure and filtered of all the major contaminants to a very, very high degree. If you're in any other situation than that, I strongly advise against steam rooms because you'll just be inhaling a lot of toxic vapors in there, which is really counterproductive as far as what we're trying to accomplish here. You'll still get some of the heat hormesis benefits, but you'll be, maybe adding more toxins to your system than you are detoxifying them. So not a good idea to use steam rooms. Highly recommend dry saunas over steam rooms unless you're sure of the water supply. So how to use a sauna: if you're just starting out and you're unsure about your health status, or your first time using the sauna, you don't know about your heat tolerance, just do 3, 4, 5 minutes in your first session at a relatively low temperature, then build up slowly from there, adding 30 to 60 seconds to each session as it feels comfortable for you. Now, that's very cautious recommendations. I'm assuming that I'm talking to someone who is not currently extremely healthy and fit and full of energy. If you're dealing with severe chronic fatigue, then you need to start very slowly and very cautiously with this. Don't overdo it. The same thing with exercise. You just want to approach this in baby steps. The infrared saunas are really the thing that has become the hottest, and forgive the pun, but they're actually not the hottest in terms of temperature when it comes to a comparison with traditional saunas, but they're the hottest in terms of their popularity. And for the reasons that I mentioned before, which are that you can get pretty much all the benefits, but while experiencing less discomfort than you would in a traditional sauna. You don't have that super hot air that's burning your nasal passageways and that sort of thing. You're pretty comfortable, but you're still sweating a lot. Your body's still heating up from the inside. So infrared saunas allow you to do that. Infrared saunas are generally going to be better for most people, especially the people listening to this podcast if you're dealing with fatigue or you're dealing with any sort of chronic symptoms, or you're not somebody who's young and already extremely healthy and energetic, in general, I recommend infrared saunas over traditional saunas. These are some of the best brands that I recommend for various reasons. There are a number of concerns with infrared saunas that you need to be aware of, because there's a lot of cheapy brands out there, you know, made in China, made with plywood, made with glues that are going to be off-gassing chemicals into the sauna and then adding toxins to your system instead of helping you detoxify. So, you know, you can go on Amazon and you can find an infrared sauna that looks pretty decent for $1,000, but, you know, a lot of these saunas people don't realize are garbage. They're really thin, low quality wood. They're going to break. They're plywoods that are going to off-gas. And maybe most importantly, very low quality emitters that are not emitting infrared energy in the right therapeutic spectrums. That's a huge factor that most people overlook and are just not aware of. You need high quality carbon fiber emitters to emit the correct spectrum of infrared to get these therapeutic benefits. So there's a lot of low quality woods and low quality emitters that are out there. There's also an EMF concern. You ideally want saunas where the brand is showing you they're doing third-party EMF testing and showing that the EMF levels, the electromagnetic field levels of their saunas are extremely low. So some of the top brands: Sunlighten, Therasauna, Sunstream if you're in Canada, Clearlight. These are a lot of the top brands. All these brands make pretty darn high quality saunas. My personal recommendation would be Sunlighten. They just make absolutely top-notch stuff. And that's what I personally have myself after doing all of the research, a lot of research, and talking to a lot of sort of industry insiders on some of the materials used by these different companies. All these companies are certainly using good quality stuff, the ones that I listed here, but there are a lot of companies that I didn't list here that are not high quality. So I do want you to be wary of that. Don't just go find any random infrared sauna. Make sure that you're getting a top brand with high quality emitters, low EMFs, no plywoods, no cheap quality woods that's going to fall apart. You do need to get a high quality sauna if you're going to get a sauna. You know, do it right if you're going to do it. How to decide which is best for you, infrared versus traditional. Basically, the way I break it down very simply is if you're young, healthy, and very physically fit, you're already vibrant, and you have a high heat tolerance, you don't have any kind of illness or fatigue or any sort of symptoms. If you're a young, super fit athlete, for example, you may want to go in the direction of a traditional sauna, just because you may find that an infrared sauna just doesn't get quite hot enough for you. If your heat tolerance is very, very high, you may want that super hot temperatures of a traditional sauna. And you may need to be up at 200 plus degrees to get those heat hormesis benefits that you need if you're that person. Having said that, an infrared sauna is going to be ideal for almost everybody who is not in that situation. If you're not a young, super fit, super energetic, super healthy athlete with a high heat tolerance, I would strongly encourage you to go in the direction of infrared saunas. I have infrared saunas myself, and this is actually me you see in this picture here if you're watching the video. This is a Sunlighten Solo sauna. Very, very cool sauna that I'll talk to you a little bit more about in a second. There's a number of different ways you can do this. You can see these are very different looking saunas. This is a big wooden chamber with infrared emitters on the wall, and then this Sunlighten Solo is something that you lay down on. It's portable, it's very light, it's a system that can be stored under a bed or in a closet and be used by one person. Also has the benefit of you being able to lay down in it, and also has one other cool benefit, which is that it's pretty much the lowest cost, high quality infrared sauna on the market. So a really, really cool device that Sunlighten makes there. Real quick, just why I'm recommending Sunlighten to you. I listed off a number of really high quality brands there. You can't go wrong with any of those brands, but I do just want to mention, as far as Sunlighten, they use really high quality woods. They don't use glues that can off gas in the sauna. They have third-party testing for EMFs. They have absolutely super high quality emitters. Also in their full spectrum saunas that also include near infrared, which I wrote about in my recent book, The Ultimate Guide to Red Light Therapy and Near Infrared Light Therapy. They are the only full spectrum sauna that uses proper near-infrared LED lights to get near-infrared at the correct temperature. So for the full spectrum sauna, highly, highly recommend Sunlighten. And as I said, they also have the solo system that I just showed you a picture of me using. So top sauna choices for different groups of people. If you're a super fit athlete with very high heat tolerance, again, traditional dry saunas. Or I also want to add that the solo sauna is actually probably the single hottest infrared sauna that you can get. So even if you're an athlete, you have a very high heat tolerance, the solo system will actually be hot enough for you. And most people can't even go in the highest temperatures in their solo system. So it does get very hot and is plenty hot enough for basically everybody and is actually too hot for most people. So either of those options, if you're in that category of super fit, healthy, young athlete with a high heat tolerance, most people who are not already optimally healthy and you're dealing with, you know, something like fatigue or any sort of chronic symptoms or illness, or you don't have a high heat tolerance, I would recommend a far infrared sauna from one of those top brands that I just recommended. So Sunlighten, Therasana, Sauna Core, Sunstream, Heavenly Heat, Physiotherm, Clearlight. They're all very, very high quality brands. I really love Sunlighten. That's what I settled on myself and what I highly recommend. So if you are the type of person that you will settle for nothing less than the absolute most, you know, incredible, cutting edge, advanced sauna, best sauna in existence, then I would recommend the Sunlighten Impulse. That is a far infrared and a near infrared sauna in one. So you're getting the sauna benefits of far infrared, plus you're getting near infrared light therapy from LEDs that are built in there as well, in the 800 nanometer range, which is giving all these benefits that I talked. If you've read my book, The Ultimate Guide to Red Light Therapy, you know all about the benefits of that. In terms of anti-aging effects in the skin, increased fat loss, increased muscle gain, brain optimization, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, hormonal health, many, many other benefits that I list out and write about in great detail in that book. So you can actually get a sauna that's far infrared, that gives that heat sauna experience, plus also has near infrared built into it by getting the Sunlighten Impulse line. And they have saunas in the range all the way from, I believe, 1 person up to 5 or 6 people, something like that. So you're getting super high quality emitters with this, far infrared and near infrared LEDs. You're also getting very, very low EMFs, third-party tested, and ultra high quality materials, no glues, no off-gassing, no plywood, none of that nonsense that you get in the cheapy brands. So if you're that type of person that you just absolutely want the best of the best, that is the way to go. For most people who are on limited budgets, who don't have a ton of money to spend on this, who still want an amazingly effective option with basically all of the benefits, the Sunlighten Solo is just the top choice, in my opinion. You just cannot do better than this. You get all the heat you want. You get it in a way that you can actually lie down, which is a really cool benefit that most people overlook. A lot of the smaller wooden box saunas, you can't lie down, so you're kind of stuck in a seated position and it can be uncomfortable. So the Sunlighten Solo system is actually cheaper, and it's, you know, portable and can be stored easily and doesn't take up a lot of space and all that stuff. But you can actually lie down in it, which is a really nice other benefit. So you're getting super high quality emitters, super low EMFs. You're getting a very hot chamber. This is actually hotter than most wooden box style saunas. So if you have a high heat tolerance, you'll actually find that the Solo gets hotter than just about any other infrared sauna. You can lie down, as I said. You can plug it into standard outlets in your house, as you see here, and me doing it in my house, and which means you don't have to hire an electrician to come do special outlets and stuff like that, which can cost hundreds of dollars. And I know, because I have one other sauna that I have to do that on. And then also the space factor. If you don't have a big area of your house that you can put a sauna in, this is something you can store in a closet or under your bed very easily. And the cost. I mean, to get an infrared sauna, high quality infrared sauna at this price, and it's around, I believe, around $2,400 for the full system, is absolutely amazing. In addition, I want to mention that Sunlighten has actually partnered with me, and I have gotten you guys $300 off the Sunlighten Solo specifically. So the most that they've ever offered the Energy Blueprint community in the past is $100. And the most, not just the Energy Blueprint community, the most they've ever offered as a discount on their Sunlighten Sola is $100 off. Now they're offering $300 off for you guys specifically for the Energy Blueprint community. So if you follow this podcast, if you follow my work, if you're a member of the Energy Blueprint program, you can get $300 off the Solo. It's the biggest discount they've ever offered. It is only available until November 16th. So you have about a week from the time I'm publishing this podcast, maybe a little more than a week or so to take advantage of this. Highly, highly recommend this. As you can see, this is me, picture here in this video of me using mine. And I absolutely love it. It's just so convenient. It heats up super fast. You don't have long heat up times. You get to lie down, so you really get to relax. You're not stuck in an upright, sort of uncomfortable position sitting on wood. And it's just amazing. Also, I'll mention it has this heating pad on the bottom as well that emits infrared. So it's a full system. It's heating you up from the top. There's carbon fibers emitters that are built into this dome structure on the top. And you also are getting it from the pad on the bottom as well. So super comfortable, just really the best option for anybody trying to get this powerful medicine who doesn't have an unlimited budget. And you can get this discount. You can just call Sunlighten, tell them that you were sent by me, you were sent by the Energy Blueprint, and that you want the $300 off, and they will know what you're talking about. I've already arranged it for you guys. And you can go to the article that corresponds to this as well, and we'll have links there. So the article page for this episode is theenergyblueprint.com/benefits of saunas. And there's a hyphen in between each one of those words. So theenergyblueprint.com/benefits-of-saunas. And real quick, just some cute pictures of me. Here's my son hanging around me. So you also get to, when you're using the sauna, you get to have your kids play around next to you, which is a nice little added bonus of it. And they get to crawl on top of it and also take the controller and pretend like they're talking on a phone. My son always grabs the controller and thinks it's a phone. He grabs the controller for the sauna. He starts going, "Hi, hello." He's about 2 years old. And this is the cutest one. He crawls on top of it and then comes face to face with me and gives me some kisses. So recap, why saunas are a miracle medicine. I just talked to you about 22 benefits. So it slows aging and increases longevity, improves mitochondrial health and energy levels. It helps your body detoxify dramatically. It pumps out heavy metals and a lot of these other toxins we're exposed to. Improves heart health and reduces your risk of cardiovascular disease dramatically. Improves blood pressure, increases weight loss, improves physical performance and endurance, increases muscle growth, speeds recovery, promotes brain performance, neuron repair and growth of new brain cells, improves skin health, increases red blood cell count and oxygen delivery to the cells, decreases pain and fibromyalgia symptoms, lowers chronic inflammation, fights infection and boosts your immune system, can combat certain kinds of cancer potentially, fights dementia and Alzheimer's, huge one. And remember, huge effect sizes on that. Really, that in itself, I think is worth, really considering this deeply and implementing this into your life just so you can avoid brain diseases, which are becoming huge epidemics. Also decreases risk of lung and respiratory diseases, acts as an antidepressant and fights depression and massively improves mood, improves symptoms in some autoimmune conditions, fights diabetes and insulin resistance, improves chronic fatigue syndrome, and increases energy levels. So tons of powerful benefits associated with sauna use. Again, I just cannot emphasize more strongly that this is one of the most powerful medicines in existence. And I think you're crazy if you don't take action on this information and start using a sauna. Now, if you can't afford any sauna, I totally get it. I understand. What I strongly encourage you to do is maybe seek out a gym nearby that you can at least start using their traditional, sort of dry sauna, Finnish style sauna, electric hot rock style sauna. If nothing else, try and find a situation like that. Maybe find a friend who has one, maybe see if you can find a sauna on Craigslist from one of these manufacturers that I recommended here, and see if that's something that you can do. But one way or another, this is just, the research is so profound that this is absolutely a miracle medicine, and that you are crazy if you don't start implementing sauna use in your life. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this information. I hope it has blown your mind to realize that there is a medicine that is this powerful in existence. And I hope that you will start using it to dramatically improve your health, your longevity, your resistance to disease, your mitochondrial health and energy production, and just live a vibrant life full of energy. And I hope you guys go get a sauna and start using it right away. Hey there, this is Ari again. One more quick thing before you go. Just make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Energy Blueprint, and also make sure to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform, whether that's iTunes or Stitcher or anything else. I hope you guys enjoyed this interview, and I will see you again next week.